by a Jewish community, and is asked in different ways to sort of adopt the mantle of a Jewish writer, I think it emerges as something that's important to him, even if what that importance mostly means is that he refuses to accept a definition of Jewish or of Jewish writer that excludes him, just as he refuses to sort of be defined by it.
I was struck that all the protagonists in the book, they work hard at their art, yet they expend no serious effort to grapple with their tradition. I mean, they don't try to learn Hebrew, they don't study Talmud, they don't live in Israel, or they don't seem to work at it. I mean, 1/10 as much as they do with their art.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think partly it goes back to this notion of community and margins that I was talking about before. One reason I think that the margins are interesting is that I think the margins in terms of, let's say the Jewish community in particular, the people who feel alienated, who feel ambiguous, who don't really want to come more fully into the fold, I think those are the people who end up being artists, because I think that that position engenders a lot of perspective and a lot of pain, and it gets channeled into art. And, if you look at sort of the pantheon of, 20th century Jewish American writers, I think that you see people almost, exclusively who occupy those margins, whether it's Malamud, Philip Roth, Kazin, Bellow, Mailer, Woody Allen, Lenny Bruce, and even some of my peers today who are writing. I think that it's the tortured relationship to the religion and to everything else too, not just the religion, but to all elements of identity and society that create or allow people sort of the space and the energy to create art. And it might be working against a tradition. It might be the desire to define that tradition for themselves. But yeah, it's probably not going to come of these sort of traditional forms of identification that you're referencing.
Now, I'm an Orthodox Jew, so when I read your book, I see it as the end of secular Jews, in that people, those Jews who aren't willing to expend substantial effort in some aspect of the Jewish tradition, such as Hebrew or Yiddish or Israel or Talmud or Jewish history or whatever, are doomed to be flushed down the toilet of Jewish history. Does that make any sense to you, an Orthodox Jew looking at this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. For me, yeah. I mean, I can see that. For me and for this book, the term "the end of the Jews" obviously has very little to do with extinction or extermination. It has to do, I think, aside from the actual reference of the term in the book when Tristan is being told about this sort of garish bar mitzvah by his grandson, and this sort of spectacle that it's become. Of course, his grandson has DJ'd it and gotten drunk and is now banished to his house because his mom is fed up with him. I think, for me, what it means in the book, aside from being a sort of term with different resonances for each generation, and a term that seems as much a part of Jewishness as anything, this sort of forecasting of the end and this anxiety about an end. To me, it's really more about the end of a pat relationship to anything, to community, to sustainability and viability of family, of religion, of culture, of anything that one can step into and sort of immediately feel at home without searching and without sort of a real sustained attempt to figure out one's unique relationship to a community or a set of values or a set of ideas.
Do you feel any obligations from the Jewish tradition?
What do you mean?
I don't know, you may not eat shrimp because you feel obliged. You may have an instinctive reaction protective towards Israel. You may, I don't know, feel obliged to know some Yiddish or Hebrew, or, I mean, do you feel commanded in any way by any part of the Jewish tradition?
It's an interesting. I mean, it's an interesting. The way you're phrasing it is interesting, and it is making me unsure how to answer it, because, I mean, I wouldn't say that I feel commanded. And I'm having trouble sort of working out sort of the idea of being commanded by a tradition, as opposed to being commanded by something, in yourself that seeks knowledge or inclusion or something. I mean, I think there are things. I think there are things I react to in a certain way because I'm Jewish, because my entire family is Jewish, because most of them got wiped out in the Holocaust and things like that. I think the thing that I connect to most strongly, though, is not a prohibition against eating shrimp, or certainly not a desire to protect Israel uncritically or anything like that, as much as, to me, the crux of the tradition, or at least the crux of what I connect with, is a notion of questioning, a notion that the Jewish tradition is one of constantly discussing, arguing, trying to resolve the unresolvable, and sustain a discussion that's been extant for thousands of years. To me, that is the thing that I find most interesting, and the thing that I see filtered down through generations, and sort of present in my own family. It's like, for me to understand my grandfather as this great legal mind, I sort of have to understand that had he been born in a different country, he would have been studying the Talmud instead of the law, and that I see these impulses sort of still beating in a different kind of way in a context that is immediate to me. But it's that notion of dialogue and of questioning that I think I connect to most strongly.
Kind of challenging the status quo.
Yeah, challenging it or investigating it in a sort of constant way.
Got it. What have you loved and hated in dealing with the Jews once this book came out? I mean, you mentioned talking to Jewish audiences, and almost every talk someone will get up and want to ask you, why are you talking black, man?
Right.
So what have you loved and hated?
I've been what I've found most frustrating is the way in which it seems like a lot of the events that are thrown and the discussions that happen are sort of a smokescreen for just a basic desire to get young Jews to marry each other and have Jewish babies. And if that's your agenda, fine, put that out there. But if you're convening a panel under the auspices of talking about community service or Jewish books or something, then I think that those topics are sort of worthy in and of themselves, and they shouldn't be sort of an excuse to get this population in a room so that hopefully they'll meet each other and flirt a little bit over the lunch or something. I get this. I get it's been frustrating for me to be in some of these settings, be invited to some of these events where it's like community service is worth doing for its own sake, not just as a way to get young Jewish people to fall in love while they're handing out plates of soup at the soup kitchen, bowls of soup, I guess. That's been frustrating for me. The notion of a certain kind of it's funny, I mean, in some ways, some of my frustrations have ended up mirroring some of my characters' frustrations in the book. The idea that that Judaism, that one is always supposed to lead with religion, and one is sort of reducible